Chapter 78.
You are now listening to the Chapter of the Architect with DJ Architect.
What's going on, my people? Once again, this is your homeboy, DJ Architect. This is Chapter 78. I got some good friends of mine, homeboys of the podcast, Big Sherman, the place to be.
What up?
Kenny Ken, welcome back, brother.
Yo, thank you for having me.
And Kenny Ken's brother, Big Mike. How you doing, Mike?
Yo, all good. Glad to be here.
Pleasure to meet you, brother. I'm sure you guys been watching the news. I've been stuck to the TV for the past 4 or 5 weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks prior to this issue that's going on in Ukraine. First and foremost, I want to give, and I've been sending out a lot of prayers to the individuals out in Ukraine. Courageous people, yes, no?
Absolutely.
Right?
Dude, Ukraine, I think, is up there with the most badass people
100%.
to exist right now.
Agree.
Themselves to be badasses on the global stage.
I agree. Putin, his agenda for attacking Ukraine. Who wants to take the ball on that?
Okay, I just watched some documentaries, so I'm lit right now.
Fresh.
So, if you look at the western border of Russia itself, it is really long and indefensible, right? So we have NATO existing, kind of pushing into where Ukraine is, where the once USSR countries existed. It's scaring Putin. I think he's using it more as a front than anything. But there's a large landmass that needs to be defended, and you can't really do that. So what he's trying to do is kind of close that gap so that Ukraine becomes a Russian state.
Buffer zone?
Right. Mm-hmm. And that way they don't have to defend as much. There's going to be a barrier between NATO and Russia. Now, that's part of it. Now, the other part is Russia spends 50% of its country's budget on energy. Now, surprisingly, they are one of the hugest exporters of energy to Europe and other countries, right? That's their main source of income. And they have pipelines that are going through Ukraine that delivers this gas and whatever type of source of fossil fuel energies to almost all of the EU. Ukraine decided to put a tariff on all the fuel that comes through there in the billions of dollars, because Ukraine is always hurting for money. They're not a rich country. They're poor. And so that's one reason that they're going into the Donetsk area, because if they take over that area, which borders a body of water, there's a port there that rarely ices over, so they can use it year round. If they take that, that's in their benefit. Now, Ukraine is also number 15 in the world of natural energy resources. So that's another reason why he would want to invade, because Ukraine doesn't have the ability to put the infrastructure to build, to extract all these oils and whatever the fossil fuels, whatever energy it is that they're trying to get. Ukraine can't do it. So Russia is pretty much just going in. They're just going to try and take it.
They have the capability and the equipment to do it.
They can. They can. It'll be a slow, sluggish process, because that's just how Russia kind of works. And so it just seems like those are the two main things. You got that big border with NATO pushing in. And then Russia is part of a group that's like NATO. It's basically like the opposing side, the CTSO. I forgot what it stands for. Continental Terrain, something or another. And Belarus, Russia, and another small country that used to be part of the USSR that's south of Russia. And So part of that NATO pushing in, Belarus is left out kind of like an island that's part of the CTSO. So they want to push up into Belarus, push that border up to there. So that way they have more of what you said, a buffer zone. I think that's a good way to put it.
Right.
So those are the two things: that border for defense, and then the mineral deposits that Ukraine can't really extract or anything like that. So the difference between people say that Putin is genius for this move or savvy. Absolutely fucking not, right? If you want to say it's genius or savvy, he would have done what China is doing all over Africa, buying them out. I'll put the infrastructure, extract your natural resources, all your people get jobs, your economy is going to grow. But, because of corrupt politicians in Africa and stuff like that, it's hard for that to happen.
Right. And that's how Russia was going at it with Ukraine prior to this. I mean, taking up their debt like 2010 or something with Yanukovych is when he signed off that deal. So they were actually doing that. They were taking the debt.
Is that the previous president?
Oh,
not previous.
Putin.
It was before
Putin.
Before Zelenskyy.
No,
Poro.
We're talking about Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
The Ukrainian president.
The Ukrainian president.
Right.
Yeah, who was pretty much Putin's puppet.
I can't think of the one that was in between,
Yes.
but Yanukovych is the one that signed that, basically a treaty with Russia saying, take our debt, protect us military-wise from the Black Sea and everything else. And that was kind of the approach that you're talking about with China. They were actually, that was what they were doing for quite some time. And then they basically, once you offer that kind of support to that country,
You're indebted to them.
Right.
And then the Ukrainian people didn't want anything to do with that.
Right.
So they obviously, got exiled or whatever have you. He left. He goes back to Russia. Gentlemen, I'm not even going to call this guy president. I'm going to call him Putin because I don't give him that respect. Obviously, he did his math, did his calculations prior to this attack. When I say math, we're talking about the sanctions that were going to be imposed. We was ready for this. He did the math, right? He had to. He couldn't be that ignorant to say, I'm going to go in there flying blind and whatever happens, happens. He had to do some kind of calculations to say, if we do get sanctions, we could possibly have something to in the wind, in a secret hidden war chest.
You're talking about like a counter to the sanctions. to balance off the economic impact that it's going to hit. Right. I think he was not prepared for these sanctions, these amount, and these aggressive sanctions, because they're hurting. They're hurt.
I don't think his cabinet was even in the know of what his intentions were, and so I think that he was having them prepare for just a blanket kind of disaster economically or whatever, and they weren't ready for it. And so and I don't even think the troops were. The troops thought they were part of an exercise.
You're opening up a good can of worms. Yeah. Mike, you got something to say?
No, just on that note, how much did he prepare? It doesn't seem like a great deal, given the amount of rations and supplies that the troops had that were invading Ukraine. They were only given about like 3 or 4 days.
3 days worth of rations, right?
Like the assumption being that they were going to go in, in a lightning quick fashion, like displace change the regime, the Ukrainian regime, and but was that an oversight? Or was it like a real commitment to a strategy that was believed to be really effective? I think it was an oversight. And the reason why I think it was an oversight is that there are so many reasons. This topic right here alone, we could probably spend like 3 hours on. But real quick, the sad state of the material of the equipment,
right? The
sad state of these conscripts, right? Didn't know what they're really getting into. And then the sad state of the secrecy, really, from between Putin and his cabinet and Putin and the other
his generals,
oligarchs,
right?
And the it seemed like not only was it an oversight, but it seems to me, all right, so here's my twist on it. He seems to be an individual who is doing everything they can. You ever meet someone who's like, easily embarrassed when some secret of theirs is revealed, no matter how minor. Like that's where he's at. Is like he's, and it's very interesting because he was really the second president after he was Yeltsin, Putin, right?
Right.
And Yeltsin did a great deal to extend an olive branch to the rest of the world and all of that. Putin did too. Like, minus some things we definitely wouldn't agree with, like poisoning, but all the way up to the year 2007, Russia didn't actually do anything on the global stage that would have earned anyone's ire. Nothing. Except reach out to NATO, reach out to the EU and say, hey, can you let us in? That's not what happened, but and part of the reason why Russia, imagine, asking to join the EU? The reason why I think that he had the balls to do so was because he was committed to the long, rich history of the Russian people. We don't want to be left behind in the dust. We are a superpower, or was, and a great power for sure. And he was snubbed. He doesn't have the economic, the military, and et cetera resources to really shore up a reaction to being kicked out of the club. But he has the ego. He's got the motherfucking ego to do it. And like hell, anyone who's like Putin in charge of one of the most, richest civilizations on the planet in history, like he's just going to go down like that, right? Anyways, that's my 2 cents. Like, and I'm sure we can dig on that for a long time.
Absolutely.
I agree with you regarding the unpreparedness of the military. When I said he was possibly doing his calculations, I meant regarding the economy and him reaching out to China and saying, hey, this is prior to the offensive happening, and going to China and letting China know, hey, this is what we have planned. And one of the resources that I was looking at, apparently China and Russia were having these conversations, I believe, back in January. And China's reply to Russia was, don't do anything until after the Winter Olympics. So let me try to stay on track, because here I am deviating to the left. So as far as the troops on the China border, he was able to grab those resources and pull them to the west. I think you're right. I think his calculations were very wrong as far as him coming into Ukraine. He probably thought the majority or 50% of the population were going to welcome him.
Well, that right there. So if you look at a map at a map of the ethnicities in Ukraine, there's essentially an east and west Ukraine. And the eastern area of Ukraine is so diverse.
The majority of they speak Russian. Right.
Historically, familial, in terms of family. Like the diversity in the eastern region of Ukraine is so extraordinarily diverse. There's no clean way to say, oh, that's Ukraine or oh, that's Russian, right? And so, well, I suppose there is from Putin's point of view, because they went to go defend like Russian-speaking folks in Ukraine, right? And the assumption was like, oh, they're going to default to our side and whatnot. Obviously, war is always messy. The most unpredictable events in any human can endeavor on.
Right.
And so he took a couple of territories, right, and claimed them. And all right, fine, so be it. Maybe, anyways, I don't know what value I can put on that, but. His assumption reminds me, and this is related, but his assumption reminds me of some abolitionists' assumptions in the United States prior to the Civil War, which included the idea that if we go into southern areas, southern territories, plantations, and free slaves and arm them, well, then we're going to kick some ass. Like we're going to but you know what happened? They'd free slaves, they'd arm them, and then the slaves would be like, fuck no, like, like they didn't, it didn't turn out that way.
I got my freedom, why am I going to die? Yeah.
Well, John Brown is a famous example of this. John Brown was I think there's a biopic coming out about him. Anyways, he was a a very what would you call him? Eager, earnest type of individual. A white guy grew up with black friends as a kid and watched one of his friends just get the absolute shit whipped out of him in a very torturous way. And in his mind, it lodged in his brain some kind of mission. I'm going to help these people. And then in adulthood, he did that. He went to Ferry's Island in Virginia and attempted to free slaves and armed them, and then got into a freaking long multi-day battle. Was eventually caught and hung, and because it didn't go as planned. The former slaves he freed didn't even know how to fight back, let alone have the gumption to fight back. I think in a sense, Putin is facing the same sort of thing in Eastern Russia or Eastern Ukraine. Maybe not. How do I really know? But I'm just saying that there's a parallel that struck me the other day thinking about this, where maybe the assumption was they were going to go into Ukraine, and the Russian-speaking Ukrainians would have somehow helped, and the number of the Ukrainian opposition would have
you also have separatists over there,
right? None of that panned out.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that Putin didn't take into account, and which I think was an oversight, nationalism.
Yes.
When the Soviet invaded Afghanistan and got themselves embroiled in an 8-year war, why didn't they easily and quickly take Afghanistan? It's fucking Afghanistan. But no, because no matter where you go on the planet, even if it's a shithole country, except quote unquote, you enter into someone else's home and territory, you're going to ignite a nationalism that'll turn around and whoop your ass.
Yes. It's guys, imagine somebody walking into your house, kicking your dog in the ass, slapping your wife, and telling you, go inside the fridge and get me a beer, bitch. How are you going to respond? Yes, sir. What type of beer would you like? That doesn't happen, right?
Rather, it's going to be I'm going to decapitate you, and if I have to die doing so, I will.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So I think talking about the occupation part of this whole thing, it seems like the invasion part is the easy part. How did it work for us in Iraq? We went in, it was 3 days for the invasion or something like that, right? So Ukraine doesn't have an extreme military. They do have one, and it is going to be a little bit more of a fight than it was for the U.S. against Iraq. But the invasion part, I think, is the easy part. And I don't think, like you said, he didn't calculate the occupation part. And it's not going to just be we're in here now. There's going to continue to be freedom fighters probably for the next 10 plus years,
right,
as long as they're trying to occupy it.
Let me add, on that note, in some sense, we kind of, we might want to be glad he made this decision. Because now one of who we thought was a competitor on the global stage is now stuck. Is now stuck in an occupation. You know what I mean?
That's a valid statement. It's almost like burning a candle at both ends. One end is he's going to be stuck in this thick mud, attempting to occupy this country, which is going to eat up resources and conscripts, unfortunately, right? That takes a lot of money to have and feed and clothe and attempt to occupy a country. And then you have these economic sanctions happen at the other end of the candle. So they're in big, big trouble. But that tells me, you put this individual in a corner, he doesn't back down, this guy. He's a psychopath. He's got no heart, no soul. Go ahead.
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think so. I think he does. It's just his calculation is very different than ours. I think that he's found himself in a tight spot that he didn't anticipate per se, but he hasn't indicated that he's really serious about using nuclear weapons. Now, there are professionals and experts who know their shit that say he might or he could or he would, yet tracking his public statements, on day to day, week to week, what I've heard him do is hedge. What I've heard him do is hedge. And I don't have an exact example right now, but I know enough that that's what it seems to me he's doing. And the reason is because the last thing I think he'd want is is to go down as the person in history who ended the fucking world as we know it. Because he'll lose. Even if a lot of us else lose, no one wants to go down in the history books as that person. Except for those who truly are fucking psychotic like Hitler. Putin ain't Hitler. Bottom line is, that's just an irrational, illogical, and just false comparison.
I got to say something. So I don't think that I think Putin is crazy, to the sense where if he knows he's losing, it's going to come down to I'm taking everybody with me.
I think just
I'm dropping
like you,
nukes. Yeah,
and I'll tell you why. I mean, to your saying is, he cares and he doesn't want to go down in the books. If that happens, there are no books.
exactly.
You know what I mean? So, in my opinion, it's almost like it's either my way or if I can't get what I want, I'm sending this son of a bitch up in flames.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's too much pressure around him to not do that. I think there's too much pressure for him to not do that. His cabinet didn't really know what he was going to do. The business elites didn't know that he was going to do this. There were too many people around him who are extraordinarily powerful and influential that didn't know that this was going to happen. So
That's why he burned it all down.
Hey, but that's a good thing, though, right? Because that means that you
sense,
have
yes.
intelligent, logical individuals around him that could possibly do, if they have the big boy balls, to go ahead and put a stop to this.
I like what you're saying.
hang on.
I mean, it is reassuring. I hope you keep saying it. It makes me feel really good.
no, it does make me feel good. It does make me feel good,
Strong
right?
opinions
Right?
loosely held here, right? Like, but something else that makes me take this line of thought is this. Okay, bear with me because, like, again, what the hell do I know?
Sounds like a
Between
lot.
1985 and 1992, when the Soviet Union, basically slowly disassembled itself, one of the very interesting things that occurred as they were self-assessing, taking stock of where the hell are we, they went from a command economy. They went from a command economy to wanting to go deliberately to a mixed economy. Well, they had to take stock of, like, where the hell are we at? Because a command economy is like business X produce, X number of widgets and, right, like business well, when they were moving to a mixed economy, they wanted to free up production and give business owners ownership, really, and autonomy to choose, what they produce or how much they produce and what they get to keep, right? Profit. The profit motive entered into the Russian mindset. But they had to figure out how this whole thing works. So the bureaucracy dove down went to the ground level to figure out, like, what's business really like. And you know what they found? The same thing we're finding out about their military today. It's basically a shit show. They found out the truth about their own command economy. It was a complete shit show. The books, the amount of corruption, the books made no sense. The corruption was through and through. And so what they realized was, like, this totalizing, universalizing ideology called communism, just a shit show. And from 1992 onward, what I think was going on was they now knew what was really going on and wanted desperately to become part of the larger worldwide economy. Because their growth, if you tracked it on a graph, their growth compared to other powers and peer competitors over the time between 1992 to the early 2000s was the slowest and most the slowest and least growing economy. They didn't want. Their society was going to was on a path of slow decay.
They knew they were in a failing system.
So they reached out. Right. Putin reached out multiple times to the EU. Hey, can we join you? To NATO. Hey, can we join you? And was snubbed each time. Okay, well then, what's he left to do? And anyway, the point I'm actually getting at is simply the comparison between what we're learning about their military today and how that tracks with what they learned about their own economy when the USSR just dissolved and became Russia. Like, it's a shit show then, it's a shit show now, and they tried to open up their economy and play fair in the world economy, but we basically said no. We excluded them. And what worries me about taking that approach, excluding someone like him from the world stage, is that, what do you do? What can you expect when you're pushing someone to the brink?
You got a corner in, right?
Right. you
Yeah.
corner
So
him.
if there's a fear that he might use nuclear weapons, it might be because he thinks he's at his last resort. But I don't think his mindset is on world domination. I think his mindset is more on like, we tried, and what we have found, and this comes from a speech of his around 2000. I don't know. Multiple speeches. He said in various ways. He said the same thing. Basically, the promises that y'all made. The promises that the world that you all made are false, have proven false, basically. And the alliances, the purposes of the alliances that you said, that you set out and created and expanded, the assurances that you gave us proved to be false. And he's not lying. It's actually factual that our promises and our alliances we betrayed them and they were false promises. So what is a man left to do in a situation like that? I don't think he's crazy. He's not trying global domination. He wants Russia to have its seat at the table in a way. And what that means is, I think, at the end of the day, is we want to be comfortable. We want to have the luxuries of, the reason why people love, aspire to the American dream or the United States way of life is, it's all the creature comforts that we have. Mm-hmm. Everyone around the world, of every color, of every ethnicity, of every spoken language on the planet, that's what they want, just their own version of it. When you kick them out of the club, you say, no, you can't participate in this. Well, guess
what do you do?
Exactly. And you don't have the resources at home to really take advantage of that, to tap into that market, tap into that economy. What do you do? Unfortunately, his choices, we can't predict them, and I hope that we don't end up in a real World War III. And to be completely honest with you, I hope that the world finds it in itself. Okay, check this out. It finds it in itself to compromise, even with a Putin-led Russia. And here's what I mean. Here's why I say that. And I might be fucking doe-eyed, green behind the ear, just Pollyanna.
It's really making me feel good though. So.
But
listen, guys, he's not pro-Russia. Listen to what he's about to say.
So let me use the Avengers as an example. The Avengers, right? Okay, we've all seen the Avengers. You know who they are. Okay. I want you to imagine a movie where it's not the U.S. or the West versus Russia. It's the Avengers versus Russia. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think, Putin, as it is right now, the Avengers versus Russia and Putin, do you think they would aim to fucking annihilate him? No. The Avengers, what they are, is a representation of the human ideal of good in the world of all kinds of mixed actors, right? Mm-hmm. And when there's a moment of time when you are at the table and have all the cards, the Avengers is a story about a way of being in the world where you extend grace, you extend diplomacy, you extend some effort at being you know what, you fuck the fuck up.
The Avengers being the equivalent of NATO, right?
The equivalent of all of these international alliances that have the decision-making power,
yes,
and the stakeholders who have the ability to say, yes, we'll compromise, or no, we won't. I think that this is the moment of time for the Avengers around the world, so to speak, the international alliances to come together and be yo, we got to tap into the deepest part of our humanity and be you fucked up, it's going to cost you X, Y, and Z, but we're going to, at the same time, open up the door so that Russian people, because Russians are our brothers and sisters, are they not?
They are human beings.
They are our brothers and sisters. Do we not want them to participate in the same fucking things that we don't deserve to? Who was born on this planet deserving the creature comforts that we have? No, not a fucking one of us. Do we not want our Russian brothers and sisters to participate in the same way, in the same sorts of things? Fuck yes.
Absolutely.
So let's pay attention to them and just recognize that Putin is just a blip on the fucking radar of what's much larger picture. Let's remember that one of the tragedies of World War I was the Treaty of Versailles. Mm-hmm. One of the tragedies was the way we just basically told Germany, we're going to shit all over you and you're going to have to fucking wear it.
All the bill, all the cost of all the countries, you are going to pay for that.
And what happened within a generation?
Right.
So I think we now have a real historical moment to look back to as a reference point on what that kind of approach gets you. Let's try something different.
You know what? That's a real good way of looking at it, and really taking a deep look at ourselves and saying maybe we could have avoided a lot of the monsters that are born. Maybe we had some play in creating them, right?
Isn't this exactly, in my mind, I've been thinking like, fuck, villain. So if y'all know those prequels like Joker, how he became the villain, like how people become who they become. Right. Putin is like, this is that moment. This is his we can create that. Yeah, exactly. This is the prequel. And what we want out of this moment, we get to and have an influential decision in that.
I like that.
In reality, to come back to the situation we're currently dealing with is, at the end, do we want to play with an individual like Putin? Obviously, we didn't give him the opportunity. He's possibly transformed or became, or maybe, who knows, this was the real person he was, and he's now saying, to hell with it, I'm going to take extreme measures. It still doesn't make it right, regardless if we created it or not, for him to bomb civilian targets, areas where the mass population are civilian, have no military strategic value. That is unsat. Let's go back to being a soldier. Apparently, they got the word they were going to be doing workups. Guys, workups in the military is when you're in preparation, right, and you're going to be deployed. But they were just doing military exercises, were they not? That was the word, correct?
That was the word.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, from what we've heard.
So the whole time,
just for clarification,
sure.
You're saying that the Russian military was told by like Russian generals that it's just
we're just doing exercises.
Like exercises?
Yeah,
like a CAX or something.
Right.
Okay.
So you're a Russian conscript. So guys, by the way,
since November.
Right.
I mean, they moved to the border in November.
Yeah, I thought this whole time that they were all on the same page. Like, we're pushing up as a show of force of some sort. I didn't know that it was because we're just doing exercise. I didn't know that.
So guys, 80% of the Russian army is conscribed of conscripts. Conscripts they're not going to be a well-trained soldier. They're pretty much being mandated to join the Russian army. A lot of these Russian POWs are coming out and they're saying, well, we had no idea. We were just here to do military exercises. We get woken up in the middle of the night. They're telling us to park our convoys in a column, and here we go into Ukraine, not knowing why we're going into Ukraine.
I did not know.
They're not giving a specific mission. They, like Mike said, they only went in there with 3 days worth of rations. A lot of them didn't even have maps. A lot of their equipment was breaking down. The logistics was horrible.
I want to pay just a quick parenthetical note about their equipment. Something really interesting to me is that the tires for the tanks were made in Russia. I mean, I'm sorry, China. They're made in China.
Like,
China. Whoa. No, so part of like like some of their vital.
You mean the tracks for the
tracks? Like,
right.
What do I know? Like I'm like vet.
Yeah, but
I'm the one non-vet here. So
excuse me, real quick. I wanted to talk to you about this. Remind me to bring this up later. What your opinion is on the Marine Corps getting rid of tanks? Because, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you guys know, but My man, Big Kenny Ken, used to be a tanker in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps got rid of tanks. I want your opinion later on.
Yeah.
Please
I mean,
try to
real
remember
quick,
that.
I cried in the fetal position for a day or two.
Hey, man, doesn't that take away one of the Marine Corps'
Our
greatest
history.
armaments? Right?
Our tip of the spear. We're the
Come
tip
on.
of the fucking
Yes.
spear. We go before infantry because we're going to take all the hits. We're going to make them use a lot of ammo. And then infantry comes in right behind
Hey,
us.
man, Marine Corps is the tip of the spear. I don't care what you... Okay,
We're still
special
gonna be the tip of the
operations...
spear.
Let me tell you something. Okay, don't get me started. I apologize.
Like, real quick, just okay. So those tracks made in China, isn't it hilarious? I think it's fucking hilarious that their tanks are getting stuck in the mud because the tracks made by China don't fucking function. They don't work.
So they
They got them on Wish.
So with I guess we could just talk about that real quick. Their tracks, they have a lot of metal to metal contact, and when you get mud in there, there's a lot of slippage and stuff,
Right.
and it also causes a lot of digging into the mud and the terrain itself. And when it gets in too deep, the sprocket gets too much dirt in between. It's like a sprocket and a chain, right?
It's like compact
Yeah.
where it won't be able to move.
Right. So there's
Yeah.
so much stuff in between the sprocket and the chain, it'll cause it to literally break because there's so much pressure.
there's no pressure.
Yeah.
There's no
There's too much
movement.
pressure.
No, right.
It's pushing outward
It's
and
pushing
outward and
outwards.
outward. It can only push outward so much
It's
before
got
it
no
finds
headspace.
Exactly.
Right.
So our tracks, we have a lot of rubber to metal contact, and some rubber to rubber contact.
So there's a lot more give.
Yeah, and it's because there's a cushion in the rubber, right? There's no cushion in the metal. So we're just more badass is all I was trying to say. But, let's get back on track. I forgot where we were.
Sherman. So what I'm seeing is that Russia, they're lacking a lot of multitasking capability, poor equipment, and lack of preparedness. This is showing us a lot, is it not?
Sure. I have a question. I don't really understand Zelensky's hushing up United States propaganda to hype everybody up during before the initial push into Ukraine. You remember when he was saying, "America, please chill out. You're making shit uncomfortable." Oh, yeah.
I recall that.
And so now you have
no
a
idea
Zelensky that's saying, "Yo, America, where the fuck you at?" And before, it was just like 5 weeks before that, he was like, "Yo, America, chill on the propaganda, the hype. We don't need this shit right now. Like, we're working this stuff out diplomatically."
Well, that was before the invasion.
Right. No,
Right.
I understand that. Even his words had a lot, or he had me thinking like, maybe we should chill. Maybe a lot of this is hype. We were hyping it up since November.
In my humble opinion, I think those are statements coming from an individual under extremes amounts of pressure. You understand what I'm saying? So at one end, before the actual invasion, he's trying to do anything in his power for this not to happen and to avoid it. And that means peace talks. If that means telling the U.S., hey, homie, do me a favor, don't remind the bully that,
that we all know he's coming.
Yeah. Right? So, and then keep this in mind for him to know that he's the number one target and his family is number two target. And then for him to have the balls to say, I don't need a ride. I need ammo.
I need ammo. Yeah,
That's
this is the badassery of Ukrainian people. Fuck.
Hey,
yes.
listen.
Yo, that shit hyped me up. I had a great ass workout,
brother.
today.
hey, listen. I felt that. At the same time, put yourself in that man's shoes, knowing that the possibilities of you being surrounded and you never seeing your family, and the end result is going to be your body burned or shot, or you not being alive to be around to see your family. Put yourself in that man's shoes for a good 30 seconds just to grasp what he's going through. So, look, he said a lot of what could be thought of as negative things towards the U.S., talking about if you do not give us a net of protection for the airspace, every death is on your head. Listen, I think it's just a man. under extreme amounts of pressure, and he's thinking, if you guys don't do this, my people will continue to die. What is the count? What number is acceptable to the United States and NATO for you guys to finally say, okay, this is enough? That is what I think that's what he's trying to get across. I don't hold that against him.
We agree that NATO is tiptoeing about how they're going to participate because of fuel and their economy, right? I mean, if their fuel supply that they've depended on Russia for so long in large amounts, I mean, if they are to go in or say certain things that cuts off that supply, they really got to tiptoe about their strategy. I mean, Poland, I think Friday just kind of said, we're going to be there for Ukraine. Like kind of like the first time they really like as a government strongly
militarily
said, they're going to give jets to Ukraine now.
Oh shit. Okay.
And so they weren't saying that before, but they just made a deal with Norway to get more flow from that pipeline, and they're strategically, geographically placed, to have that benefit, right? But we have Italy.
Is that the pipeline
Spain.
from Russia?
So the one that's coming from Russia going into Poland, that's the one would get cut off essentially when they start doing what they want to do in Ukraine. So now they have to get a big portion of their fuel from Norway. And I mean, that's just kind of across a pond, right? And so then we have Italy and Spain. Who do they have? They have to look to like Algeria for their fuel if they're going to make the switch before they could start saying, yeah, we're into Poland, or you know what I mean? Like, we got balls too. We're going to go in and do everything we can to protect you. But first, these NATO countries have to get it squared away where they're going to get their shit from. So investors don't pull out of their markets and they go bankrupt. Like, fuel is a big fucking problem. And everybody's thinking like, NATO, what the fuck? Why isn't everybody talking like Poland was on Friday? Let alone, where was Poland?
I think you're right that they're tiptoeing. NATO's tiptoeing around it, because if they interject too much, I think that's World War III, right? That's Russia's going to have to respond to the counter. Then they're going to have to counter. Then we're going to have to counter, and then it's going to be like, this is it. We're just going to fucking go to war now.
But World War III aside, even if you were to set that aside, if a country like Italy was to say or do or participate heavy in this invasion, they would bankrupt their country. I think they'd be left with nothing. It would just be a matter of words and small actions, and Italy would be done. And until they figured something out with Algeria or more pipelines to the south.
In a way, that might be a silver lining, because there's a reason why no one's declared a no-fly zone over. I think is it over Ukraine?
It's over Ukraine. Let's talk about that.
No one's. Yeah, that I wonder. So, because the moment NATO institutes a no-fly zone over Ukraine, World War III.
Agreed.
Basically, right?
Agreed.
Right? And NATO necessarily is tiptoeing, and then you add the fuel element to it. It's like, okay, I kind of think that might be a silver lining in a way, but at the same time, it isn't like the stakeholders at the higher levels of decision making are not. They probably are deliberately tiptoeing, because World War III, man, no one wants that.
No.
And so in a way, it's like, I think we're going to see Ukraine on their own, but with European and American material, right? And good, like cool. Like, that's the interesting thing, though, is like, I think it was just today or yesterday, Putin came out and said basically, hey, the West, y'all need to stop supplying Ukraine, because his pretense was these weapons are going to end up in the hands of terrorists, kind of like reifying this old war on terror boogeyman.
Yeah, he's putting a spin on it.
Oh yeah, it's the Putin spin on it. But that to me is is the excuse that someone goes to when they know they're out of excuses and they're losing, and they're like, "Fuck, don't kick my ass that bad." Right. But what's happening on the flip side of that, which is where Putin is digging himself into an impossible position, is he's taking the same extremely heavy-handed tactics that he applied in Syria. And in the war in Aleppo.
Yes.
Like extremely heavy-handed. And that's when all you have is a hammer, you better believe everything's a fucking nail.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's where he's at. So
So I have a question.
yeah.
So we've already interdicted the U.S. itself, not just NATO, but I think we gave first was like hundreds of millions of dollars to Ukraine, and then again like $6 billion, from what I understand. I don't know if that like passed or went through or something, but we've already given so much. Like, how has that not triggered Putin to respond like, "Oh, you're gonna give him money, motherfucker"?
Hey,
You know?
if
I just don't know. I'm asking. Yeah.
if I could. So recently, I think maybe 1 or 2 days ago, Putin came out and said sanctions are the equivalent of declaring war. Is that correct? That
Close to it.
Right.
Like he didn't say it is.
Right.
He hedged it.
So this is what I'm saying. Russia's been hit with sanctions for a long, long time past 1 or 2 days ago. Now he's coming out and saying this. I'll tell you why he's coming out and saying this. More so when they started having rumblings of sanctioning Russian resources. Like, stop purchasing that. And he said, do not politicize resources. I think we hit a nerve. I think he knows that if the global community stops purchasing Russian resources, they're done. I mean, to sanction the oligarchs and all that, it'll create some turmoil, but it's not going to be a nail in the coffin. I believe this will, and he knows it.
Yeah,
and that's why he's saying, don't go there. Do not go there.
When you have them getting kicked out of SWIFT, when you have Visa and MasterCard saying we're not going to authorize any transactions anymore, and so on and so on and so on, I think these are the reactions he may not have accounted for that well.
Right. I think when it comes to the resources, that's one of his lifelines that are still giving life to Russia. Without that main vein, they're in big, big trouble.
Yeah, Russia's one of their main source of income. 35 or more percent of all of EU's like energy and fossil fuels comes from Russia. So
the response of European nations to that is going to be an accelerated pace toward renewable energy. And the further along we all go down the renewable path
And away
the
from
more
oil,
we move away
yes,
from Russia's primary
the
source
more
of
it's going to
energy.
hurt them.
Exactly, which is why they need to enter into the global economy and participate in ways that go beyond just those fossil fuels. And
But we know he's not going to get it done in the way that he's doing it. And we also, obviously, per the conversation we had earlier on, we need to be a bit more forgiving also, right?
at least compromise.
At least
compromise.
right. And I'm not talking about, guys, I'm not necessarily talking about with Putin, but I'm talking about different scenarios with other individuals in the future. We definitely have to keep that in
what's
consideration.
happening? Yeah, I mean, the people of Russia are getting fucked, you know, and that's why
Agreed.
people say, yeah, and that's why people say,
Yes.
like, when
Right.
when I hear people say this is genius, this is savvy, and it's like,
How?
the people of Russia are getting fucked.
They're getting fucked.
People of Ukraine are getting fucked, and now Poland, I think, just received hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians.
Hey,
I
man,
believe.
you think Putin is not going to eat his caviar later on this evening if he wants?
Yeah,
he's good.
And but it's like, is that the genius savvy part? That's kind of, I would say that's the opposite.
I
right?
think it's selfish.
You know, he's eating that caviar with a fucking pit in his stomach.
That's
He's eating
true.
that caviar with a massive amount of anxiety.
I would hope so.
Well, you know, he put himself in that position. People could say, yeah, well, we put him in that corner. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, he's still a human being. He still has the brain to sit there and make choices.
I wonder how he feels. I would like to
Just to be
ask him.
like a
Probably not
inside-
savvy. Probably doesn't feel savvy.
Yeah, he's got to be frustrated.
It's like because there's no finesse in this. It's like if he finessed his way in there, if he took over Ukraine without losing one life, I would say that's fucking genius and that was savvy as fuck. You know what I mean? Like that's why I say like how China's doing their thing. That's genius. That's savvy because nobody's dying, and they're taking over
all the resources of the world. They've got a bunch of American property.
Yeah,
all these wineries actually.
Yeah,
Jamaican wineries.
Yeah, man.
Like half of them, right?
Yeah.
The one of the key differences between Russia and China is that culturally, as culture translates into politics, China takes a 100-year-long view.
Yes,
China has a 100-year-long plan.
Yeah,
Russia's like, I need to cover up all the fibs and lies and secrets and puff my chest up because I ain't got nothing back here really.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? No substance, right? They're very different. They don't have a 100-year-long plan. What they have is a plan to defend their thousands-year-long history. And its status. Right. So this is a game of status.
Yeah.
Right. Putin, it's already, in a sense, it's lost.
It's lost.
And comparing him to China's like it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, because Putin he's putting himself in a position where the global community will no longer want to extend the olive branch because of how he's being so destructive and just blatantly killing civilians.
That's why our response has to be surgical, because I truly believe. And I'm not, I know this might sound Pollyanna, I ain't trying to be, but the bottom line is those Russians are our brothers and sisters. Like, that's why you have to be surgical. Punish the ones who deserve it, but protect the ones
who are innocent.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Yo, could I don't know, change subject a little bit, but did you guys see the video of, so there's a lot of Russian soldiers that are defecting and just going over to the Ukrainian side and stuff. Did you guys see the video of the soldier that defected and the Ukrainian people like swarmed him? They gave him like tea. They gave him warm.
Called his mom on FaceTime.
FaceTimed his mom. Like, do you want to call your, like, who do you want to call? He calls his mom. He's like,
I've seen both sides. I've seen a little bit of both on that one.
What do you mean both sides?
I've seen some rough stuff too. I mean, Ukraine is definitely jacking up some.
Oh yeah.
So that's when.
Come on over.
That's when civilians. That's when they defect to civilians. But when they go to the
when they
actual
defect
boots, they're getting treated a little different.
I wouldn't be so kind either.
Listen, I think it was the second day. I can't blame them. When I saw this video, I probably watched it 3 or 4, 5 times because I couldn't believe it. I was like, what the fuck? I mean, look, man, nobody in the military or countries are perfect. There was a tank that was driving one way, black vehicle driving the opposite. You could see the tank bank to the left intentionally. It's like he was playing Grand Theft Auto, and his objective was, if I run over this car, I'm going to get 500 points. And he ran over the damn car. I couldn't believe it, man. I was like,
wait, this was a Russian tank?
This was a Russian tank. 2 days. Yeah, it was like the second day.
And I'm not sticking up for a Russian tank, but I am sitting next to Kenny here. Maybe he can help me out with this. But I did hear that he was actually going towards another tank who was off to the side and out of the picture, he saw him and went to engage and didn't see this car that was coming down the freeway. That's how I heard it. But how are any of us supposed to know?
If everyone's under and hatched up, it's hard to see out of those periscopes, and you could unintentionally run people, buildings. You can run things over.
Cool. It's good to have the perspective of a tanker in the chapter of the architect to give that opinion. But seeing it and watching it,
sure. That's also a media twist.
It does.
It does look purposeful.
It does.
Uh-huh.
And
I haven't seen it.
Thank God the driver survived, man.
Oh, they did survive.
The driver survived.
It was pancaked, and
the guy survived. The person survived, man. But it was like atrocious. I was like, oh man, that is ugly. Look, I'm gonna tell you guys how I'm thinking right now. Specifically, I don't know if the Russian military is being cunning, coy, playing possum, but they have not. The Ukrainian airspace is still being contested. What are we in day 10, day 11? Russia's considered a military superpower, is it not?
It's supposed to be, but I disagree with that by a lot because
of what we're seeing. Right?
I would say no, even prior. All of their scare tactics as to like, oh, the Russians have this missile that's so surgical and stuff. It doesn't.
They got that
impress me.
hypersonic missile,
Bro,
right?
we are the biggest military industrial complex in the world. Our budget is as much as the next 10 countries combined. And the thing is, 7 of those 10 countries are our fucking allies. So it's like, we're preparing for World War 87.
Yeah.
You know? And
I agree.
And we're so far fucking advanced. Like, I really am not scared if somebody decides to go to war with us. The only thing I'm scared of is like nuclear fallout and stuff like that.
Right.
But even China, I am so not scared of China. Because if we were even to go to hand-to-hand combat with them, like physically, physiologically, we're like 35% bigger than all of them.
But you know they outnumber us, right?
It'll be like if you put a spider on an anthill, right? You put a spider on an anthill, the spider's going to get fucked up.
Russia's army is 900,000 plus deep. I mean, how can we say that's not?
Wait, Russia's military is 900,000,
and they sent initial push was like 150,000.
But technically, 80% of those are conscripts, right? 80% of that, 80% of the military is conscripts. So, meaning they're watered down. They're watered down soldiers. They do not have the training, the capability, the mental fortitude.
Well, how often do they go to war? How often does the U.S.
That's a good question.
We go to war every 10 years.
So check this out. So check this out. When the Russian soldiers says that American troops are exhausted and tired, and that makes us weak, we say, no, bitch, we've been training for war for the past 20 years. What makes you so good? The actions that happened in Aleppo and Syria, they maintained airspace superiority because the opposing force doesn't have an air force to contest them, right? So we never really knew their capabilities. Now we do. Now we know that their command structure doesn't have a lot of communication. And at the same time, I ask myself this: are they being coy? Why did they not send out their best equipment, which is probably the miscalculation, right?
I think me and Sherman will probably be able to answer that. I think partly because they didn't want to send out the A team off the bat. I thought they think the B and C team could take care of Ukraine. Right? Exactly. It's like how we do things sometimes where we just, I don't know, like even in Afghanistan, we sent at the peak was like 50,000.
That was more. No,
I think it was even less actually. I think Iraq was more because it was like an invasion and a push. While Afghanistan, we were already there. We kind of just said we just put more troops in, looking for Bin Laden. And then we just said, fuck it, we're going to make a vacation spot here. So we just chilled there. So Afghanistan was really weird. But Iraq was more like, we have an offensive push. I think it was like 70-something thousand or something like that in Iraq. I don't even remember. But check this number out. In the first 2 days of this Russian invasion into Ukraine, Russia lost about 2,800 soldiers in 2 days.
Dead?
That's what I heard. Yes, that was like from a reputable
source.
source.
Number that
And I think that was like for sure 2,500 up to 2,800, possibly even more. Yeah. That is more troops lost in 2 days than the Iraq invasion and Afghanistan in 2 years.
Damn.
That's a good point. Go ahead.
I think, regardless of how catastrophic their offensive has been, I think we still can't sleep on them.
100.
I think they have. I think we have not seen the
they still have
best
nuclear power, right?
Right. I don't think we've seen the best equipment or the best capability that Russia has to impose on its enemies.
But you were asking earlier if they were being coy, right? Like the number of troops and the amount of equipment that's now being deployed, I think proves to us that they're not being coy. Like, they may not have sent their A-team yet, or special ops yet, maybe, perhaps, probably not, I guess. They're holding a couple cards back right now. But the number of soldiers and the amount of equipment, it appears to communicate like there was really intention of like shock and awe,
right?
Almost, sort of, kind of, but clearly they're not even capable of it. They're not even capable of it, and therefore the heavy-handedness that we saw in Syria, I think, is going to play itself out here, and you can already tell because of the amount of civilian targets that they're hitting.
Yes.
So they're bypassing a lot of the groundwork and tactical work because they don't have the capability to use any of them in any effective way. So they're using their missiles instead.
Look, any military that continues to bombard a civilized location, a civilized target, that tells me that they do not have the capability to go and fight a one-on-one war. And it's sad because the Ukrainian people don't have the numbers. They don't have the equipment. What a coward military does is sit back, fire mortar and artillery fire on the civilian. But why? Because they want to destroy and dominate and impose their will and not get hindered. How are they going to hit them back? I mean, they can hit them with drones, but what are they, Ukraine, what do they have, 25, 40 drones that are coming from Turkey and being purchased? That is not going to be enough to stop the onslaught that's happening.
Yeah, I think that Russia sent their B team, they're probably like the C team maybe, is just because he's reserving the A team for an attack because he's
that's
thinking,
what I think.
Yeah, so it's like if we do interject with NATO or US and troops and stuff, then it's like, okay, I saved my A team for this specific thing.
And that's
so
why
more
I
like
say,
an offense than an offense.
And that's why I say, for the people that are sitting here saying, man, damn, these guys are shit soldiers. Don't sleep, man. Do not.
Well, I mean, those guys are shit soldiers, but we gotta expect.
Right.
Don't expect that if we were to go to war into their land.
Right. Just because you see a person in a bad light doesn't mean that they don't have a tuxedo tucked away somewhere. You understand what I'm saying?
Something tells me that their brainwash game is a little weak too. I mean, there was no false flag that got them hyped. There was no like big event that actually made them passionate to like defend their country or go in with a major event. Like we always have something, whether we create it or not.
That's why they have low morale. The troops do.
And I think that's what's happening with the Russian people as well, because I heard that there are actual Russian civilian defectors as well that are going into border countries just because they disagree with this so much that they're like, this is some of them have said that Russia is now irreparable from this event and they don't want to be Russian anymore. I don't know what the number is, but quite a few. Yeah.
Russia recruited the individual who was responsible for directing news at Fox. And they recruited and hired him, brought him over in order to teach them basically how to do propaganda Fox News style.
Trump hired him later on?
No, Russia. No, Russia did.
I have a question. So Russia hired like a Fox News agent.
Director of news. That was his title, director of news.
To propagandize their journalistic...
Yeah, and here's the result of it. Russia, Ukraine, they're bordering states. There are a lot of Russians in Ukraine, a lot of Russians in the western part of Ukraine where it's Ukrainian. Anyway, so I read a lengthy article that basically said this and that used many anecdotes. Here's one. A younger 20-something female lives alone, a couple pets in Ukraine, and would be on the phone with her mom in Russia, in Moscow. Hey, Mom, just so you know, like, fucking Russia's bombing us, man. I can hear it from my apartment. I can feel it, And her mom's like, oh, no, they're not, or something along like that. It's just an act. Sometimes things happen. They're just out there to just kind of get a job done. And the point I'm making is that they're deploying a kind of propaganda effort that is working to a degree, and a significant enough degree that it is influencing the way Russians at home think about the effort, the war, the invasion. So something about the propaganda is working. And not only that, here's the crazy thing. They're learning how to implement and deploy it U.S. style, which, let me add this quick note about propaganda and its use by others, foreign countries. Jim Crow era. So let's think late 1800s to early 1900s, 1920s, 30s, and so on, basically until the Civil Rights era. Jim Crow. During the very early 1900s to the 1920s, Jim Crow was like super at its height, like, you know, black water fountains, white water fountains, etc. In addition to public lynching events and so on. All of these events, like separate but equal public executions, essentially, were all protected by law. Like, all protected by law. Right, and the Third Reich in the 1930s sent a delegation to the United States of America to study Jim Crow.
Wow.
Because they wanted to figure out how to divide their own society and create an other. In philosophy, like, it's the other, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to figure out how to do that in a way that was like within the infrastructure of their government and the infrastructure of the politics.
They're right. Yeah, they wanted a template.
So exactly, they needed a template, and they went nowhere else in the Jim Crow United States. So my point is this. What we fear regarding propaganda in other places around the world is displaced. It's misplaced, I would argue. I would claim that our fear of propaganda is misplaced and should be expected when it comes to times of war in other countries. Should be expected, right? But what really, I think, offers itself as a lesson to us here across the pond is, or halfway around the world, is the fact that there is something about us as a society embedded in our historical, like, DNA that is fucking dark.
Yes.
It's dark and lends itself to, I don't know what else to call it, but evil.
Destruction.
Evil. Let's call it evil.
Primitive destruction.
Exactly.
It's embedded in all of us. That's
It is. There are others better at it than, others are better at
More
it than
efficient.
others. Yeah, exactly. So, exactly. And making it efficient and making it look like news, right? And anyway, so I think that there's something that the American public should be aware of, which is this fact that the director of news at Fox News left his position at that company to travel to Russia to teach them Fox News style propaganda. Yeah. Now that's that. How many parents? I don't know about y'all. My parents, my mother, Fox News all day. Fox News.
My family split.
And I know my mom ain't the only one.
She's Mexican.
And which complicates what I was going to say. Which complicates things. It's like, holy shit! Like, you're like, anyways. So as far as the propaganda point, it's like they may be doing it well. They may not be doing it that well. We don't quite know yet. But at least the little bit that I do know, it's like it's working. And if it is working, the extent to it's working, I think that if we're going to be a mature, evolved society that's kind of protected by two oceans, and we're looking out at what's happening in the world, I think there's a moment during which we need to reflect on what are we contributing to, what else are we exporting that we don't know about that is having an influence. And one of the things we're influencing, or one of the things we're exporting that's influencing the rest of the world is diabetes, is obesity, is shit diet, and Coca-Cola. Now, okay, that's material. immaterially, the invisible stuff, the stuff that's the stuff that's invisible, as we sit here drinking Coke, and is the stuff that's invisible is the shit that'll influence your mind, the shit that'll influence your brain, the shit that'll influence the way you see the world, the propaganda. Now, how and in what ways is our lens being programmed? And as emotional as we become at reacting to information is as much as we need to reflect on what's causing that reaction.
Ourselves.
Exactly.
I agree. I think we have to be or become evolved enough to rise above the rhetoric. Right? To know yourself and say, you know what, I'm going to switch to Fox. Even though I don't agree with what they're saying, I do it just to see a different point of view. And the moment that I start to receive the venomous spew, I'm reminded of why I don't watch it.
Sure.
Right? And it's the same thing for CNN. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
They may be a little bit more along the lines of how I think, but they definitely don't write the script of how I perceive the world.
They're definitely clickbaitish. They put up titles that are like that make you click on it. Like, what the fuck?
Sometimes
and it's like what they talk about isn't even like what's in the title. It's just,
Kenny, sometimes I watch it just to see how hypocritical and bullshitted they are.
God.
I'm like, you know what? So
crazy.
I think as human beings, we have to be smart enough to realize, hey, man, don't allow yourself to be implanted with bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Let me add on that note. This is my first time here.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be here.
He's really excited.
Pleasure having you, brother.
So if there's one thing I would say, if I had to choose just one comment to make, it'd be this. One of the reasons why everything you said is advice everyone needs to take. Watch the other side, listen to it, and then assess your own reaction to it, and then kind of assess what are you really reacting to. All right. I want a quick closing comment on that before I make the point in my head. Each segment on Fox, on CNN, etc., is only a few minutes long.
Right.
And that's in each program. And even though each program is from 6 to 7 or it's on from 7 to 8, you subtract the ad time, you subtract the bullshittery and the niceties and the politeness, you really only have 40 maybe minutes of actual just whatever the fuck they're talking about. And whatever the fuck they're talking about, they're only talking about it for a few minutes at a time because they try to cram in 100 different topics in 40 minutes.
Right.
So anyone who listens to news, turn that shit off. Because the only thing that really matters to an evolved human brain is actually, I would claim, is long-form content. It's the only thing that actually offers itself as a truly worthwhile endeavor. Yeah. Really, in the process of informing yourself. Now, here's the point that was on my mind that you sparked. Here's a couple facts that I've connected the dots on over the last several months. We all know that human beings love measuring things, right? And I think we need to take human beings who love measuring things seriously, right? They're crazy, but in a good way. So social scientists have measured basically, literacy rates across ages in our population for a long time. One of the things that they found recently is that over 54% of the United States population between the ages of 16 and 64 years old have a 5th grade literacy level. 5th grade. Ladies and gentlemen, 5th grade. Now, it doesn't mean you don't know how to read. It means that you don't, what literacy rate means is how to handle and manage information.
How to process information.
Okay, so now hold that thought in your head, right? 54% or more of the population in the United States of America has a 5th grade literacy rate.
You going to Ukraine?
They know
Are you
that.
going to say Ukraine's
Hey,
next?
man.
No, because I don't know that. But
99%.
But we're talking about not reading, right? We're not talking about I know how to read versus I don't know how to read. We're talking about I know how to handle and manage information versus I don't know how to handle this information, but it makes me feel this way. So fuck yeah. Right. Okay. Wait. I'm not done. No, hold on. Here's the other dot to connect to that. The other dot to connect to that is this right here. Holding up my phone. This right here. Every single fucking one of those persons between 16 and 64 has a device in their pocket that's as or more powerful than the Apollo mission.
Yes.
Equipment that sent humans into outer space.
Yes.
So if I go onto Facebook enough, or this enough, or that enough, or that enough, or this enough, yeah, I begin to feel like, God damn it, I've got a fucking PhD too. I'm an expert too.
Yeah.
Fuck yes.
Yeah.
Look at all the biases I'm confirming here just because the algorithms really know me. That no one's talking about the algorithms. Do they know anything about the algorithms? Probably not. Because everything here is just continually soothing my ego. So you couple the most powerful device in the whole goddamn fucking world with a brain that has
the literacy of a
capability,
5-year-old.
of managing and handling information only at a 5th grade level. By the way, do you know how old 5th graders are? Who knows how old 5th graders are? 10? Yeah, fucking 10 or 11. Yeah, so over 54% of the population aged 16 to 64 has the ability and skill set and the wherewithal to handle information as much as 11-year-olds. Think about that. Think about that.
They have the ability to be brainwashed very easily.
Hey, so can I read something from Carl Sagan? So Carl Sagan was an astronomer, cosmologist.
Popularizer of science.
Yeah, he was the guy that pretty much helped Neil deGrasse Tyson get to where he is. But he said something on this in one of his books that is exactly this about America. If I could, it's not very long. It's probably 30 seconds worth. But this is from Carl Sagan in his book. I have a foreboding of an America in my children's or grandchildren's time, when the United States is a service and information economy, when nearly all the manufacturing industries have slipped away to other countries, when awesome technological powers are in the hands of a very few, and no one representing the public interest can even grasp the issues, when the people have lost the ability to set their own agendas or knowledgeably question those in authority, when clutching our crystals and nervously consulting our horoscopes, our critical faculties in decline, unable to distinguish between the feels good and what's true.
Yes.
We slide, almost without noticing, back into superstition and darkness. The dumbing down of America is most evident in the slow decay of substantive content in the enormously influential media. The 30-second sound bites, now down to 10 seconds or less probably, lowest common denominator programming, credulous presentations on pseudoscience and superstition, but especially a kind of celebration of ignorance.
Listen,
I love Carl Sagan.
Listen, what
Drop right there.
what that tells me is that regardless of what outer enemies that we have, we still have an enemy at home. And we need to be very conscious of that.
Vigilance is as important at home in your heart as it is out there.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you all ever, Jordan Peterson, don't know if that rings a bell. I know that he's a lightning rod figure who, either love or hate him. Okay. But anyway, Alexander Solzhenitsyn is a writer who survived World War II and all of that. And he wrote a book, very famous book. And in it, he has a line along those lines, which you just reminded me of by saying that. Excuse me. He wrote a line that is very relevant here. I'm looking for it because I don't want to butcher it because it's worth it's worth finding and saying out loud. So his name is it's difficult to say exactly, but Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Yes, and he wrote a book, and God damn it. Anyway, so he says this basically: the line that divides good and evil does not run between countries or parties.
Agreed.
Or peoples.
Agreed.
The line that divides good from evil runs through the heart of every human being.
Agreed.
And if that lesson can be internalized, then can you imagine how much grace and kindness we'd extend to everyone, to all our neighbors? Because I'm as fucked up as you, I'm as dark as you, I'm as cunning and deceitful and maybe open to lying and whatnot and manipulate. Like all that shit that exists in the worst figures of history, those qualities also exist in you.
Right.
What are you doing to temper them?
But it's our choice where we put value, invested energy into. Like, do I consume my time into being devious and a liar and a thief, and or do I invest my time into doing something that I would feel that's more fruitful for myself and for humankind, right?
It's like that. There's a Native American story, and goes something like this: like a grandfather or an older person says to a younger person, basically, like, careful about, how. Anyways, it's like the feeding of two wolves. There's a good wolf and a bad wolf, and well, how do you keep the bad wolf at bay, and how do you keep the good wolf, closer? And the grandpa says basically, feed the good wolf, and then feed the good wolf, and then temper the bad wolf. Not that there's one or the other. The point is, both live in each of us.
Right.
In which wolf you feed, will get you your result.
What about the situation where Russia has in its arsenal low-yield nuclear weaponry? They have that.
They do have that, yeah.
I was doing some research, and I kind of find out that that's one of Russia's strategic plans is to go ahead and strike with a low-yield nuclear weaponry if they're put in that
Could you explain what a
low yield is? It's still a nuclear warhead, but it doesn't have this destructive power
capacity
or radius
as
so
it's like a more
that was implemented in World War II
type of.
It's a baby warhead.
Okay.
I don't see a difference.
If the Russian government implements a low-yield nuclear armament, does that green light other countries to strike back in a more maximum effect potential nuclear war?
So on the surface, they drop a baby nuke, right? They say they take out half of a town of a Ukrainian city or town or whatever. I would say it's time for NATO and U.S. Hey, we're not going to let you do that shit again. We're taking your shit over. We're going to fuck you all up. And that's kind of...
It doesn't even have to be nuclear.
How do you think?
I don't think we should respond nuclear.
It doesn't have to be
We
nuclear.
should respond with bomb the Kremlin. I'm pretty sure we have the ability. So I think the U.S. alone, at every fourth or sixth degree, we have satellites 25,000 miles that orbits the Earth. We have, so that's just like a few of the thousands of satellites we have in orbit in comparison to Russia. Russia has, I think, in the tens maybe,
right? And
a lot of them are just communication. I'm sure we have the ability to just start striking Russia without nuclear, taking out a lot of their military offenses and defenses. The biggest problem with that is that we will take out civilians in the process just because they're going to be near those targets, and there's going to be like no way of eliminating that collateral damage. But will it be necessary if they drop a nuclear bomb, a baby nuke or whatever?
Right.
Yes. It's time. There's going to be civilian deaths at this time. That's
NATO,
World War III.
Does NATO have the green light to say, you know what? Okay, they brought nuclear armaments into it. Let's go ahead and just take care of this right now.
If they drop one,
right.
we have to prevent them from dropping another.
Sherman,
and that is fighting their military.
Right.
That's World War III.
It's World War III is what is so. I mean, it would benefit the world for Russia not to go there, right? Obviously,
yes, because if we go to war with Russia, we're going to be going to war with China.
I don't think there's enough support in Russia to keep the trend going if we were to take out just a couple out of the cabinet and leadership. I honestly think we know where they're at every moment right now. Right now, we know exactly where in the world Putin is. We know if there's a second that we're a little tripped out on, we know where he is too. And honestly, if one nuke warhead was dropped, unless there's a much bigger picture, like, conspiracy wise, and they want some shit to kick off, we could definitely. I think we could stop the forward momentum.
The response for something like that, because it's like, okay, they did it once, they're probably going to do it again, right? They want to continue this forward momentum, like Sharon said. It's like you have to prevent that. You have to strike it. You have to get involved. And the only way to get involved is to start World War III, sadly. I think that's what's preventing us from entering right now. Same thing why we don't do anything about North Korea, because there's a fucking crazy dude with
got a bully.
Nuclear power.
Well, the difference between Putin and Kim Jong-un is that Kim Jong-un has tested numerous missiles, failed, but tested them. Putin hasn't, probably because he has a whole artillery of nuclear warheads and whatnot. If there was a baby nuke dropped in Ukraine, my suspicion is that I doubt it would really. I doubt it would begin a nuclear war. I doubt it. If it, or, just taking the hypothetical question here at face value. If there was a baby nuke dropped somewhere in Ukraine, I think that the international community would look at that as like, okay, that's Ukraine, not a member of NATO. So it doesn't kick off Article 5. It isn't a member, right? So it's as independent a nation as an independent nation gets, right? Okay. What we probably would do is arm Ukraine to the fucking tilt. Everyone would arm Ukraine to the fucking tilt, and then be at their back in case, right? Would we nuke Russia? I don't know. I doubt it, because smart people don't want a motherfucking nuclear World War III. And so my guess is that we'd arm Ukraine to the fucking tilt, and then they'd become like a powerhouse that could compete with Russia on equal measure. That's my hunch.
Did you say you would think that if they did drop a baby nuke that we would interject somehow? Or we would interject, whether it be surgical and precise, non-nuclear warhead. I mean, that would be the favorable response if I was to
launch by you. My guess is it'd be launched by Ukraine. Like, you know what I mean? Like we'd be on the sidelines, but supporting.
Yeah, but America likes to have that.
But
that hero.
But what's really interesting on that note is that there hasn't been that. I don't know what to call it, but there hasn't been that talk. Like the White House, the Congress, like no one has beaten the American drum. Like, we're on the cusp of intervening, and if we need to, we will. Like, I think, thankfully, the United States hasn't been the 800-pound gorilla in the room that everyone's really interested in appeasing. Rather, it seems to me more like the United States is confidently on the sideline with all of our other partners. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's a good place to be. Would we intervene in the face of a baby nuke in Ukraine? My hunch is still that we'd intervene in terms of
not with our equipment.
You don't think?
Well, not with our personnel, I should say.
Not with our personnel.
But definitely our money, our equipment, our
1,000%. And that'd be what would help, I think, get Ukraine. So we're talking about the Ukrainian army. We're talking about the Ukrainian military forces, whether they're like real military or just fucking civilians that said, what the fuck? Like, hardy people. Hardy the fuck people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if we contributed equipment-wise, financially, like, you know, and not just us, but like other allies, Ukraine would take down Moscow, would take down Putin, would take down the Russians.
What do you guys feel about veterans going into Ukraine and helping them out, going in there and helping the surge?
Have you seen that meme picture of Matthew McConaughey smoking putting a smoke in his mouth? And it says on top of it says
Sure be
all the Iraqi and Afghan veterans thinking if they got one more left in them. You know what I mean? Hey, I would definitely be so down if they said we're going. I'd be down to like re-enlist and do all that shit. I would be down. There are American citizens that are going there to fight.
Veterans.
They're flying. Ukraine is actually paying the flight and giving weapons.
Yeah.
Yo.
So if you wanted to go, they would send you the plane ticket right now.
All right. Is there like a Twitter that
Yeah. This makes me think of Zelenskyy, and Zelenskyy was he was a comedian, right? Who played he played the role of a president before becoming the president.
Right.
Man, they're doing well with him enough to make our veterans like take those plane tickets and go fight for him. That's how much of a leader. And I'm not saying that he isn't inherently like that's just who he is.
Right.
But I do think, you know, we know how to create a show, right? And I think he's the man. I think even if this was just a complete, like if he was just a plant actor, made up, whatever, our world needs that. I mean, we need somebody to look at and go, this is how a motherfucking leader should be. And hopefully that affects something. Hopefully, you know, and like I said, he could be as real and true as they come. I have no idea either way. But I mean, the setup, you know, we have no idea. He was an actor playing a president.
The presentation,
you know,
is
whatever.
nice. Yeah.
It is fucking nice.
Yeah.
It is nice, and it is doing what it's supposed to do. And so when you said, or I don't know, one of you was like, so would America go in and be the hero, or would they want Ukraine to do it? I kind of have a different opinion now, because I kind of think they're setting the stage for this guy to make the story, like to be the Cinderella. Oh. And so like, and that's what we're big on. People like a good story, right? And you know, they need to pump the right people up for the right reasons. I'm all for it. I mean, we don't just get this motivation out of nowhere. You know what I mean?
Somebody's got to pump us up, right?
Right. Somebody's got to pump us up.
Got to be a good story behind
real
it.
or fake, whatever. Conspiracy, who gives a shit? Guess what? It's working. You know, like whatever. But yeah, I could see him being. I could see them wanting him to play that role.
I don't see him to be false. I don't think you can be false when you tell genuine. The United States government, I'm not going anywhere. If my demise is here in my country, my demise is here in my country.
Whether you wrote it or not.
One thing that I have to state about the Ukrainian people, and like I said, on Friday, I had a conversation on the phone with my cousin, and he put his homeboy on the phone, and he had opposing arguments. And one thing I wanted to say was that he was stating that, well, you know, the Ukrainian government is corrupt.
Very much so.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's irrelevant now. True. And on top of that, you have Ukrainian citizens stating, who cares if my government is corrupt? It's my government. We chose this president. Those are our problems. It's not Russia's problem.
Exactly.
And I would say this to anybody. I would dare for anyone to say that no government in the existence of the world has never been corrupt. That's bullshit.
What you have at play are these totalizing, universalizing ideologies. And in Russia's case, or USSR's case, it's communism. In our case, it's liberal democracy. I could say more about that, but that ain't the point of the podcast, this episode at least. The interesting thing is that these commitments to these universalizing ideologies, communism in the USSR, it somehow made for weak men. In some weird way, it made for weak men. Like if you took Stalin, or you took any of it, up to Yeltsin, I suppose. Well, not quite, but if you took Stalin, the people who were really responsible for a lot of the atrocities committed in their countries, and we sat him right here, I would imagine he'd be a bitch. I have a sneaking suspicion he'd be a bitch.
Right.
Okay, so now you have these. I don't mean to be saying it like this, but you have these bitches in charge of these enormous civilizations, and they are in charge because they happen to be in charge of all of the security forces and all the arms and what have you, right? So they can put their fist down and really make society what they want it to be. So is there a similar situation here in Putin? I don't think so. I truly don't. But as far as the Nazis and their place in the Ukrainian army, like there was a point in time in World War II when Russia was fighting the Nazis at its front door, and
That's right.
And so there's a real historical fact that's being artificially propped up as a pretense. And yet the fact remains that there is a Nazi wing in the Ukrainian military that's propped up by oligarchs, and they make a fraction of the actual Ukrainian military, but still significant enough that if they really wanted to and they were organized enough, they could really fuck some shit up. I'm probably,
Did Russia really drop genocide claims with that as well? Do you guys remember that?
It was pretense.
He said Ukraine
It was pretense.
was genocidal or something. I think I read that.
Like he was going in to stop the neo-Nazi genocide?
Yeah,
That's what he stated.
Okay.
Yeah.
All pretense, but but this is exactly okay. I don't know how y'all feel. I don't know how Carlos Kenny feel about Trump. I don't know how y'all out there feel about Trump. But basically, it's the same sort of dynamic. It's the same kind of dynamic. You have these individuals who really all of a sudden find themselves in charge of a military, in charge of like a massive operation that if they wanted to, they could, deploy any which way. Damn it, my point eluded me right here. But anyways, all right, so passing the mic. But yeah,
That was anticlimactic.
extremely anticlimactic.
No, man, that's why I understand you, dude, because
Edit that
my
out.
mind thinks the same way.
you already there?
And I try to
You were
capture
already there?
I try to capture whatever thought I have like as quickly as I can before it escapes, man.
Man,
Yeah, no, it's all good.
If I was a woman right now,
She cheated on me on the on the guy to her right, no matter what he looks like. Anyway, my bad.
How was the cleanest way for us to get out of this?
It's got to be surgical, and by surgical, what I mean is isolate the perpetrators, isolate the perps, and fuck them up. And never forget the fact that Russians are as diverse as we are diverse here in this room, and that diverse from us, and are as interested in just the simple things that we want out of life too. Surgically separate our Russian brothers and sisters from the perps. That's my take.
What's your take, Kenny Ken?
well, I think isolating them is like. I agree with that, but it's the isolation part. How do you do that? How do you do that without physically going in there and going to war?
You just set up a meeting in like Diego Garcia and then just drop a bomb.
Wait, what is that? Could you explain it?
Oh, it's just a tiny island.
Tiny island.
Oh.
Here, close to Australia.
Oh, let's all meet here. Then they go there to meet, but we're not there.
Diego Garcia. Poor Diego Garcia.
Putin, I got some underage ladies that you would love to meet at this island.
Epstein's actually alive, and we have him at Diego Garcia.
Trump will be there. He'll meet you down there. He wants to get pissed on too.
Oh, gee. Oh, yeah, we got some dope. They're totally pissed on you. They're totally.
Hey, listen, guys. I think, Mike. I think you're right. I think it needs to be an isolated precise strike. More so, it would be much more peaceful if it comes from within the Russian government.
I think that's happening now, right? So I read that not only the oligarchs are saying like, Russia, I mean, Putin, could you kind of stop? I lost $7 billion and stuff. The stock market plummeted 52%. The ruble is like 0.000
less
to
than
the penny.
a penny.
Something
Right.
like that. So, not only the oligarchs, but there are leadership position people. They're probably dead now because they went on paper. I don't know, on camera against Putin's thing here. Yeah. So I think it's happening. And the people, like I said, are defecting to other countries. Russian soldiers are defecting to Ukraine. They're kind of giving themselves up. I don't know the number of that, but the what's the capital of Russia? St. Petersburg?
Oh, right.
St. Petersburg, right? Dang. Yeah, the smart one. So Moscow and St. Petersburg has a growing number of protesters, and as far as I know, the number has only grown.
See, and that just goes to show you, man, their people aren't with this war.
Not at all.
You know what I mean?
They're not.
I gotta say, I'm sorry. I gotta say, look, the fact that at this point in time, right now, on March 6th, on Sunday, U.S. time in California, my hunch is that there's got to be over maybe 1,000 people arrested. Russian citizens arrested at protests, and it might be more than that, and who knows exactly how the Kremlin is actually dealing with that. But the fact that there are so many Russians who are against this is exactly reassuring. That's exactly right. So then, that just creates more of a burden to deploy as surgical an approach as possible, because at the end of the day, think about it. Those people over there in that country, their entire way of life has been upended. And not because there was a cause for it that they can get behind, but because the leader of their country is just willing to throw them under the bus. Their protest against that has to be seen in the same kind of light that protests that our people conducted 50, 75 years ago for like their own freedoms and their own entry into like the way of life that would garner the creature comforts that we all take for granted. Our Russian brothers and sisters out here are demonstrating their feeling about their Ukrainian brothers and sisters as their leadership is killing them, and they're protesting that. How can we support that as quickly as possible, while yes, they're going to feel the hurt of all the sanctions, but how quickly can we get through all that hurt and just get to the people who are really responsible, and then flip the page and turn the chapter,
move on from that.
How
fast can we do that, right? How effectively can we do that?
If part of the criteria or agenda is protect the future of our young, especially Russian brothers and sisters, like if that is a criteria, if that is an aim, and we head toward it, keeping it in our foresight, I think we would set ourselves up, not just the United States, but us and all of our allies, especially, because Europe is probably going to have to lead the reaction to this, and we'll support, right? Like, how can we separate the people from the leadership that's actually doing this, and then separate like the leadership that's really responsible for this? It might be something crazy like a call on like, look, y'all, we didn't bring the motherfucker back in the body bag. Like, I don't know, right? Like maybe,
right.
Evil. If evil is evil, then you got to treat evil like evil.
Right.
I'm gonna, this might not sound exactly relevant, but Martin Luther, the founder of the Protestantism and Lutheranism, Martin Luther, who nailed the 95 Theses on the door of the
Catholic church in whatever that neighborhood was in Germany. Where the hell was I going with that? Where was I going with that? Yeah, exactly. I've had too much to drink and it's ain't even noon.
If I was a woman,
No, dude, I hate that. It happens to me too. Go ahead, man. Try to.
Yeah, no, I know. Like my mind is a 15-lane highway, and they're all
Yes.
fucking fast.
Yes, dude.
They're all the one lane.
Bro,
15-line freeway.
In
they're
my
all the
brain,
one lane.
I'm playing Frogger 24/7, trying to get across
Telling
the
you,
other
man,
lane. Dude.
fucking ADD right there.
15 lane freeway, and they're merging into one.
Hey, if Chomsky was right about how we've done business in the past, we already have a plan, and we already have people there that are trying to motivate that country to do the right thing, what
Look,
we think is right, and overthrow and a coup and whatever.
This from Noam Chomsky?
Huh?
Noam Chomsky
Yeah.
said this? Okay.
That's what he's just gone over every
Look.
country in the Latin Americas and even other places where we've actually gone in and put somebody of our,
Right. We call them jackals. All right. And these are spiritual operatives that we send into third world nations to overthrow a government and to install our puppet president. And listen, I don't want to get into that. I will say this. It's very telling when Putin all of a sudden signs into law that if you are an individual in protest, you're going to get 15 years. Right?
Yeah.
And now
Wait, just for protesting, you get 15 years?
Yeah, just protesting, man. You're like getting 15 years. And then they're trying to impose a new law where if you get caught protesting, you're going straight to the military. So I say this to the Russian people. Have all the young people stay at home and have all the grandfathers and grandmothers and go out and protest. See how effective your military is, stupid. To have our platoon of geriatric veterans will destroy you. How can the global community ever extend an olive branch not to Russia, but to Putin while he's in power and extend him and afford him any type of comfort, peace, communication? Nobody's going to want to mess with him.
What if we did extend that olive branch out, but bypass Putin and extend it out to the people? Is that
how are you going to do that?
I don't know.
It would have to be post-coup, right? It would have to be post a
Yes,
major
he has
coup
to
op.
go.
It
He
doesn't
has
feel
to go.
good to say that, but I think when you're dealing with war, like absolutely, 100%.
And that would be beautiful. That would be a beautiful story. They took over. Yep.
So you're
That's
talking
when
about
the olive
a
branch would
coup.
come after a coup actually removed Putin from office and his top 3, 4, 5, whatever he's got in his cabinet. I don't even know. But yeah, if they overthrew that, then we came in and gave him a big hug and said, okay, you're ours now.
How did
I don't know if that would, I don't know if that's realistic.
probably? Well, I would hope so. But how did Putin become so scary, where everyone, no matter who it is that he's in charge of,
After talking to him, Mike, I did that water boy thing. I came in thinking he was a monster, but now I'm picturing him, that little baby with the gold curly hair. And after hearing Mike talk, I'm thinking, maybe maybe he isn't this big spooky guy. But
I don't think he is a big spooky guy, but
that's not what I'm asking. That's not what I mean, he's like, to us, probably not a big spooky guy. Physically, I think he's even shorter than me. I'm 5'8", so I'll fuck him up. But it's I'm wondering how his leadership of Russia has become so scared of him. How journalists refuse to write pieces against him and stuff like that. Like, how did that happen?
in 2004, or right around like very very close to after the time he came into power, he poisoned independent journalists. And so like he put so Putin isn't like a democratically elected leader.
Okay,
You know,
could I ask
he
you a
was
question on that though? So
although
how
he was voted in.
I have heard all those stories.
He was groomed by Boris Yeltsin to protect Boris Yeltsin and all the individuals that were going to get crushed. That's why Putin is in office. Putin,
And he was KGB, right?
proved himself
KGB,
that he was going to protect all these motherfuckers.
So he
And-
like showed his loyalty by protecting all of them,
Yes.
right? But then I guess my question is like Russian leadership, they are all scared of him and stuff like that. How did that happen? How did Putin become a feared man by Russian leadership and journalists and stuff like that? Yeah, I get that he poisoned so many journalists, but how did he get people to poison the journalists? Like, how did that happen? You know,
KGB.
like
The going all the way back.
How did he get such a loyal crew to back him up? Hey, I want to poison these motherfuckers that are talking
it's
shit.
Boris Yeltsin's same crew.
Not only that, it goes all the way back to Stalin. Like there was a whole during the Gulag and Stalin years, there was a team of chemists that were responsible for developing poisons that were meant that were specifically intended and meant to appear like a natural sort of death, or to present such confounding symptoms that the source of the problem would never be found. So that goes back 100 years. So they have a commitment to this way of basically like doing away with critics, and that hasn't gone away. So that's Russia sort of, that's one of Russia's MO, I guess. And the how did Putin develop such a committed population? He hasn't. It's the difference between a popularly elected individual in more or less democratic nations versus a nation where a person rises to power through connections, etc., 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 and is placed in power to protect individuals as well as to basically carry out basically violence in a sense, right?
Right. So that brings up another question. So Putin had the backing to kind of almost like a mafia, right? Like, hey, I could protect you over here, and then so people, I guess, is it people that are paying, are people paying to kind of for that protection from Putin? And if so, like, how did Putin create this mafia-minded crew that kind of backs him up on everything?
I think that the answer to that is something along the lines of a Tony Soprano sort of story, in a sense, right? Like, basically, right? Like, if you step out of line, you're done.
You gotta swim with the fishes.
basically, right? No, I
Take
think
your
so.
thumbs or something. So I don't know that whole thing, like Putin's interjection into the offices of Russia is so bizarre to me. Like how, I couldn't even imagine if in the U.S. we found out that journalists were being poisoned and found out that it was the leadership. It's like
There'd be an uprising immediately.
wouldn't there be? Yeah,
I would think so. I would hope so.
Yeah,
We don't have the history that Russia does of SARS, who sherms out.
Sherm's out.
Peace to Sherm.
Sorry, guys. Gotta go.
No worries.
It's Sunday.
It is.
He's got family business, I guess.
Gotta go pick up In and Out. Actually,
There you go. Nothing more important. Gotta feed the family. I think that Putin's rise to power
right, cool. I'm gonna stay with people.
all right, later.
is based on violence and the fear of violence, the fear of fearing the end of your life will make you do some crazy shit.
I'm sure. Yeah,
Yeah, and especially when it's for no real good reason. Especially when it's like for no real good reason,
Right.
And
Or
it's
for
easy
your
to comply.
for your personal accomplishments or your personal satisfaction or
Exactly, it's
very
making
selfish,
it
man.
easy to comply.
Right.
Like, yeah, you know, and yet at the same time, Russia is such an enormous country and a population that's as dispersed as it is, even though like a huge majority lives on the western side of Russia.
Yeah, I heard that the population of Russia is the same as Spain. Spain's a little tiny thing too.
All right, especially compared to Russia.
Yeah.
But just goes to show you look at it and it's a vast landmass.
Yeah.
But obviously some of the areas aren't.
They're not habitable, right?
Right, just like some portions of Arizona or Texas or Alaska, right?
We have a lot of empty spaces,
Right. I think, gentlemen, at the end of the day, and it doesn't necessarily have to have talk about the specifics of what's going on in Ukraine, but more so of how we treat ourselves as human beings, and to avoid complications that we're seeing right now in Ukraine, is to treat ourselves with a little bit of more compassion, empathy, understand that we're not perfect, understand the United States has done some atrocities from the get-go. We own slaves, so how the hell are we going to paint ourselves with a white picture of purity? That does not exist. It will never exist. No country will ever be perfect in the way they govern. We do have to hold people accountable that commit atrocities. Absolutely.
100%. The weakness, the chink in our armor, each individual, is a bias for the easiest answer.
Right.
And it goes
Isn't that
back.
Occam's razor or something like that?
Well,
or is that something a little different?
Occam's razor is like the simplest answer is probably the more correct.
The more
Yeah,
correct
okay.
one, right?
Now that's different.
Yeah,
than
that's
what we're talking
different. Yeah,
about. Like there's a bias in our mind that the easiest answer is usually the one we're going to gravitate toward. And what you're hitting on, what both of you are really hitting on, is an aspect that needs to be corrected badly. We have these categories in our minds of Republican and Democrat. So we automatically default to whatever we perceive to be Democrat or Republican.
Yeah.
And which sadly cuts us off from everything else.
It
that makes
divides
us
us.
human. It cuts us off from our own humanity.
Right.
Because if I am automatically, if I hear you say words at me, and the sounds of those grunts and syllables and words coming out of your
Go
mouth
against
hit my
your
ears,
belief,
go against my
your belief,
then I'm
you're going to
automatically gonna
categorize
put
me.
You into
You're going to categorize me.
So I'm not listening. Do you understand that?
You're
I'm not
automatically
listening.
categorizing. Yes.
I'm waiting for you to finish what you're saying so I can make sure you belong in this category.
I had a conversation with a gentleman named Joe. My cousin George gave me a call, put me on 3-way, unexpected, but he put me on the phone with a buddy of his, very smart, articulate individual. And we get into this.
A New Yorker and a Boston.
He's from Boston and I'm
you
from
go.
New York, right? And but that's not the relevant issue. The relevant issue is that the motherfucker was stoked with good knowledge. And a lot of the knowledge I didn't have a rebuttal to because I didn't have information to rebuttal to. And all I can say, man, that's not
Like maybe
that's not a point of contact where I can refer on because I would be giving you bullshit answers, and I'd rather not say anything, right? Mm-hmm. But the things that we were battling against were legitimate things that I was articulate and had knowledge into. And at the end of the conversation, I said, you know what, I gotta go, guys. But listen, it's been a privilege to have a conversation with an individual that has opposing views, but we can agree to disagree. Like there were points within the conversation that we would get boisterous against each other, but we never cursed. We never called each other fuck face, fuck Boston, fuck New York. You understand?
A New Yorker and a Bostonian never cursed. I don't believe that.
We were cursing, but we were not cursing at each other.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we were able to say, man, it was a pleasure to speak to you. And you know what? More individuals should have this type of dialogue.
1,000%.
I respect that, man.
Dude, you know what that reminds me of? Look, here's the power of podcasting, and here's the power of modern day technology, and here's just the power of being in 2022, is that here's like some vision that I have in my head about the way the world is right now. Ukrainians and Russians and Europeans are in a tight spot. And more than ever, they need the rest of the world to get clear in their thinking what the fuck's going on. And so therefore, like, what we might be able to do, and at least how we might be able to understand what's going on over there. And the more that individuals who are just, who the fuck am I? Like, who am I to be sitting here talking about what's going on halfway around the world when I don't know shit? But yet, we are human enough to be able to take the courage to get on the
Give a little time to it, at least.
and devote time to it with each other, so that we can at least further our own understanding and possibly anyone else's who's listening. And we're not the only ones here talking like this.
No.
We're not at all. There are those who are talking about this who are way more well known and have
Right.
sponsors and all that. But
Right.
there are a lot more who at this level of doing shit.
Right.
And the more we put our voices out there, the more we're creating a kind of hive mind where it's like everyone out there who has a voice to speak, fucking speak.
Speak, man.
Fucking speak. In addition, equally, simultaneously, for those who have ears to hear, fucking listen. And the more we do both, and dialogue, which is essentially the definition of dialogue, the more we all do this at the same time right now, when the world needs it more than ever, we all might be able to kind of elevate ourselves and fucking elevate and lift everyone else around us to the levels of humanity where we all need to get to, so
Yes.
we can put an end to this fucking crisis in a way that punishes those who deserve the perps who deserve it, but then preserves the life and enhances those who really are on the
In the middle of
who
it.
are on the brunt end of all this shit.
Right,
Our
right.
brothers and sisters, right?
Right.
Like, so this hive mind, what I'm absolutely like, just kind of, I don't know. I stand back and I look at the bigger picture and I realize like these electrical signals that are going out into whomever's eardrums where this is landing right now, this is exactly the moment where it's like this conversation is happening to wherever it's going out. And there are who knows how many countless conversations like this that are happening as well around the world in other languages we don't understand. All together is creating a hope, creating a hive mind that might, kind of like influence the direction of this crisis. And our Ukrainian and Russian brothers and sisters need this more than ever. So the more we talk, the more we dialogue, the more we speak, and the more we listen, like the better we're doing for them. This is some version of our own.
This is
like
our way
own-
of supporting their war.
Exactly. This is our own version of that.
Right.
Because what's happening is we're not just sitting around like, we're not sitting around just sort of beating off. We're this
We're
is all happening.
talking. We're
in hopes of
engaging. We're creating
understanding.
possible solutions, right?
And that hive mind,
Right.
is what's happening right now. I
Right.
hope. And this might be a way like where
This is the way
this is so
solutions
unique.
are. This is the way solutions are found through speaking, communicating, finding new ways of. Wow, we never thought about this. What about this? A solution can come from anywhere.
Exactly.
Right?
And as
Solution
long as
of
we remain
peace.
open to it.
Right.
As long as we remain open to that possibility, then solutions will come and changes and progress will occur.
Right.
And the things that need to happen will happen. And that right there is like, that's the humanity we need right now. We need as many people speaking about this. We need as many people speaking about this as possible right now to get on their microphones, to get together with their friends, to get together wherever they are and start speaking about this. Because the fallout from this in a year's time, let's say, will determine whether we create that villain in the prequel or we create the world that we really want, where we all our brothers and sisters around the world get to participate in all of the benefits of just advanced society
Right.
at this point. When I think about myself in a world of like nuclear fallout, when I think of myself in that world, y'all are vets, so take this with a grain of salt from a non-vet. But if there were fallout from here, and things went south, y'all would maybe more than me be ready to take up a hatchet and swing that motherfucker wherever you need to do. Like I know I have that in me. If things go south, I know I have that in me. But is that the world any single one of us wants
to live in?
Is that the...
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
I truly think there are some people.
Well, but you know, they're
that
fucking maniacs.
There are.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There are maniacs that want that to happen, right?
They live off of the adrenaline rush.
Exactly.
Which is it's an addictive drug. I was addicted to that shit after I came from Iraq and I had no idea.
Dude, I'm going to plug right now. Sorry, pardon me, everyone. Carlos, I'm addressing you specifically right now on your microphone. So, you edit this out if you need to.
No worries.
I'm going to tell you the name of someone who you 1,000% need to have here. 1,000%. He lives in Cardiff. So just down there. Vet TV. VET TV. The founder and current chief of content there is a person who speaks a lot about like the this aspect of being a veteran and being in wartime and all of that. Like he speaks to it in an extraordinarily articulate way, but like as more human than I guarantee you've ever heard. Which means, by which I mean to say, he speaks about like the aspects of warfare and the humanity part about it in all of its dark, demonic,
deep crevices,
just
the ugliness
like he puts it all out
of what
there.
it is. Yes,
exactly. Now, so what I'm saying is, I'll connect with you after,
please.
But
please, and you know what? Please, let's say this. Let's get those connections and let's bring you back with them and let's bring Kenny back.
1,000%.
Let's make that happen.
So I guess the plug is Vet TV. It's they have a YouTube channel. It's basically
it's an app
all the
as well.
It's basically all the stupid shit that we've been through, but they make
fictionalize it and dramatize it.
And it's just super fucking funny.
Yeah.
Super
Now, on
funny.
top of that, there's a serious component to all of that. So it's super entertaining. It's entertainment, but there's an informational part about it, documentary type kind of informational part about it. They just released a multi-episode, you might as well call it a documentary, where what they're doing is talking to vets across all the services, and talking about like what happens to you when you when you kill someone.
Oh,
Like what happens to you when you are in warfare and you have to go to those dark places that exist in every single one of us in order for you to survive, for your brothers to survive, and for the enemy to be knocked off. And he goes there in the most articulate manner I can imagine. And he does so in a responsible way as well. Like the serious part. There's the entertainment part. Entertainment part is fucking worth every cent on its own. I'll tell you that. The production is fucking phenomenal.
Mike and Kenny Ken, any last statements, any last words before we end this podcast?
I don't know, it just sucks that we're so small in the grand scheme of things, and it sucks that we can't like get personally involved with something this big. It's kind of impossible. So I would say don't beat yourself up knowing that you can't change anything about the outcome, and you're doing your part by continue living the way you've been living and taking care of yourself and your family. It's you're doing your part that way. And it's don't beat yourself up over something that you really have no control over.
Mike, what are your last words?
I'd piggyback on that and say, while we may not have hand on the front lines, as it were. And while we aren't in a wartime economy like the U.S. was during World War II, there's still what Kenny just said is precisely what we can do. And I guess my twist on it would be the taking care of your family part and taking care of yourself part. Wisen up. We all need to wisen up. That's the call of the hour, is wisen up, smarten up, and help scaffold for those around you. By scaffolding, I mean help them elevate their own understanding, help them elevate their own sharpen and clear up their own perspective on what's going on, and open up lines of dialogue at your own dinner table with your own family, and implement the skill set that is what we call dialogue, which is both speaking clearly, saying what you mean and meaning what you say, as well as listening, and listening for new information, not waiting until the other person finishes speaking, but listening for new information and being humble enough to integrate it and being corrected. I think one of the responsibilities that comes with having two ears and one mouth is accepting new information and then figuring out what to do with it and integrating it. That's a responsibility that comes with listening. And then speaking, the responsibility that comes with speaking, I think, is meaning what you say and say what you mean. It isn't easy, and I'm not great. I'm not perfect at it by any stretch, but the effort itself will pay off. In the exact same way that the effort at everything from bench pressing to sharpshooting to marathon running and anything else under the sun, it's the same thing. The more you do it deliberately, and you'll get better at it. And those around you who are under your care will see it and be influenced by it. And that's my 2 cents.
Listen, I've had the opportunity to have a good friend of mine, Kenny Ken, who was a tanker, United States Marine. My good buddy, Sharm, who was a Navy veteran, and Kenny's brother, Mike, who is obviously an individual with a plethora amount of knowledge. I think what it really comes down to is respecting each other.
This was fun. This was good. It was kind of enlightening because
It was extremely enlightening.
I learned a lot.
Extremely enlightening.
Man, I just thank you, Carlos, for putting this out there and inviting a group of people who have opinions and insights that I don't think your average Joe has. Keep having these conversations, man. Keep having them.
Thank you, Mike. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the chapter, The Architect, chapter 78, man. A big prayer to the people of the Ukraine and a big hoorah. Keep fighting hard, man. Get it in. Get it in. Thank you so much, man. Love you. Be at peace. We out.
DJ Architect.